Hello and welcome. Moss Adams is pleased that you've joined us for today's session, Improve Your Strategic Vision with Technology. Before we begin, I'm going to play our housekeeping video.
Welcome, and thanks for joining. We're pleased to present our continuing professional education webcast series. Before we begin, please keep the following in mind. You can customize how you view our presentation and interact with the presenter. For better viewing, close all other applications and turn up your speaker volume. You can adjust window size and placement or enter full screen mode using the controls at the top right of the window or dragging the bottom right-hand corner to resize. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a series of icons that relate to a different aspect of our session. You can download a PDF of today's slides from the Slide Deck and Handouts widget. You can ask questions by typing in the Q&A window and clicking Submit. We'll do our best to answer all questions or follow up via email. If you experience technical difficulty, refresh your browser by hitting the F5 key. Today's session offers 1 CPE credit. To receive credit, you must meet the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy requirements. You must attend at least 50 minutes of the session and respond to at least 75% of polling questions. To participate in the polls, please check the button next to your answer within the slide window and click Submit. We'll track your progress and alert you when you've earned CPE credit. You can then click the certificate icon in the CPE Progress widget and download your CPE certificate. Don't worry if you can't download your CPE certificate today. We'll email you a copy in 2 weeks. If attending this webcast in a group, you must complete our group CPE attendance sheet, available in our Slide Deck and Handouts widget to receive credit. Please have all group members sign it and send only 1 sheet per group. CPE credit can only be awarded to participants registered as themselves and isn't available for participants who view the on-demand version. This presentation is not legal, investment, or accounting advice. We encourage you to seek the counsel of a professional service provider to apply this content to your specific circumstances.
All right, today we have 2 presenters from Moss Adams. We have Michael Parker, partner in charge of strategy, technology, and operations consulting, and Chuck Andrews, director of technology advisory. Their contact information is located in your webcast console for your convenience. And now I would like to turn the floor over to Chuck to get us started.
Thank you. Again, my name is Chuck Andrews. I'm the director of the Tech Advisory Group here at Moss Adams. Been working in technology for over 30 years, both in the corporate world as well as consulting, primarily working with enterprise systems in complex environments. And Mike, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Chuck. This is Mike Parker. So I'm the partner in charge of our strategy, technology, and operations consulting at Moss Adams. Been consulting for a long time, 30 plus years, across a wide variety of platforms and industries and sizes. And really across that, the focus has really been helping clients identify the right solutions, select the right solutions, implement them, maintain them, manage them, and really just use them to better run their business. So I'm really excited about today and I appreciate everyone's time and joining us today. So let's get started with what we're going to talk about. So the agenda for today is, really what is strategic alignment for technology? There's a lot of conversations about that. I think there's a lot of areas we could cover. So we want to kind of level set a little bit to start out with, and then feed that into some of the strategy and technology alignment drivers. What do we see that really need to focus on, or events and things like that really impact the ability to both create and manage a strategic alignment plan. Then we're going to transition into something called the strategic planning value chain and really dive deep into that, into the areas of focus as we build strategic plans out. And we'll close out, our last area will be the strategic technology roadmap service that Moss Adams provides. I'll do a little brief overview there. And then do Q&A, but definitely enter your questions in to the Q&A chat box during the course of the presentation. We are going to try to leave time for Q&A, but if not, if we for some reason don't get to it, we can always follow up and make sure that we address your questions. So with that, we're going to start with the polling question. Amy?
All right, thank you. So our first polling question is, do you have a technology roadmap in place today? And your options are yes, no, or not sure. And the polling questions are located right on the slides that we're presenting. So if you can't see it, just hit F5 to refresh your console. All right, they're coming in pretty quickly. Make sure to hit the submit button once you select your answer. All right, here are the results.
All right, good to see everybody. Good kind of a spread. Actually, a little surprised by it being this even. But no, I think it's good to hear that, you know, a lot of people, I think a little higher percentage that I felt like had a technology roadmap in place. So yeah, very good feedback and good insight into where everyone sits in their journey. All right.
So I guess the first thing we'll cover on the agenda here is let's get a definition for strategic alignment or technology. And really, technology is only going to be as valuable to you as it's going to be supporting the business specifically. And a few questions to ask regarding that is, does your technology landscape and plan support the key initiatives in your strategic plan for your company? So is there an alignment there? And, you know, kind of from an M&A perspective, you know, does the tech landscape support the investment hypothesis? Where are we going? What are our sales goals? That type of thing. And are the following components being considered in every technology decision? And that is people, process, and technology. People, because someone's got to drive the machine that's put together. Process, because we want to deliver our service and our product consistently, which is kind of the definition of quality. So we need some consistency there. And then lastly, technology in terms of, you know, what is the architecture that we need to make that happen? And again, circling back to the first question, is your business strategy and plan truly driving the technology initiatives, investments, and priorities? So when you're looking at that portfolio of IT projects, does it look like it needs to be to support that strategic plan? And is it prioritized in such a way that it's serving the business? So anything to add on that, Mike?
Well, I think it goes back to, I think the biggest thing here, and it's really going to be the kind of major theme for today, is really making sure that your technology plan and roadmap is not only aligned with the business strategy, but maps directly to it. And really, even to the point of, if you're doing something, you have something on that plan or roadmap, what item in the strategic plan or the overall business plan does it tie back to? So you understand why you're doing it, understand what's the impact to the business, and really being able to tie those two together in a very defined way. And I think that's one of the things we see a lot of is that they don't. There's a lot of very generic plans and programs that if you look at what's going to move the business forward, there isn't a clear understanding. And I think that's one of the really key themes as we walk through all of these activities today. So.
Good deal. Thank you. So once we've got this defined here, one of the things I also wanted to cover here was kind of drivers that indicate that you need to look in this direction, potentially review that alignment plan. or get one in place. And a couple of swim lanes that we're looking at here are events and indicators. And we have to understand that we're working in a dynamic environment, and strategic plans anymore, because we're kind of in the age of disruption, used to be you did your strat plan and it just kind of sat there. You were able to ride that thing out for a number of years. And now we're seeing revisits to the strat plan consistently. And so the point I'm driving home here is, if you're looking at your strategic plan that often, you have to be looking at your technology that often. Is it doing what it needs to do to serve any kind of pivots or changes you've had to make in that strategic plan? And some of the events that can impact this, some of them are no-brainers here, like, M&A activity, acquisitions, divestitures, or carve-outs. We've seen examples of where companies do huge carve-outs, and a lot of modifications that were made to their technology were serving the business that was carved out. And so we end up with kind of a bloated system where we're trying to pivot into probably a higher margin business, but it's kind of difficult to get there because we've got a disconnect based on the fact that we've done this huge pivot and that the technology would need to be revisited. Recent market entrances through newer services or geographic footprint. Where am I having to deliver? And am I having to deliver a new product or service? And does the technology serve that? And does the technology communicate that change so that the market's aware? Internal restructuring needs based on business model or operating changes. So the pivots I mentioned before, move to cloud migration from on-prem, and then focus initiatives related to outsourcing non-core business functions. We're seeing a lot of that now, where we've got 3PLs, co-packers, third-party manufacturers involved, and how well is the technology working with those third-party folks, and how securely is it working with those third-party folks? And in addition to the events, some of the indicators you may see in the business that drive this would be heavy manual lists for reporting and decision support for finance or operations. This is one we see more often than not. And typically the complaint is, I don't have the decision support until the decision's already been made. And so the idea here is that if you're seeing these indicators, what are the gaps in the systems currently that are preventing you from getting that essential information? Excessive customization, manual processes or shadow systems. Provide operating functionality rather than your core system. One of the things you'll hear in this presentation a lot is shadow systems, and we do see them frequently. And we'll get into those a little bit later, but it is an indicator that there's a misalignment between what your business is doing and what the technology needs to deliver. Increase labor spend to address pinch points and operational processes. We see this a lot in the back office, particularly where we've got a disconnect between the transactional flow from the front office to the back office, and we've had to ramp up back office folks to address that. We typically see that because on the revenue side, you're not going to fall on your face in front of the customer. So you're going to do what it takes to deliver and perform for the customer. But in the back office, where you've got kind of a shroud between you and the customer, there may be a lot of heavy lifting going on and some additional labor to get billing out, to get cash applied, to apply payments, things of that nature, or reconcile accounts. And the idea there being, where can I take that labor spend, get some automation going, and address that elsewhere? Again, indicative of an alignment issue. Increased cost or margin erosion around key areas like sales, accounting, HR, supply chain, or product service delivery, especially if I don't understand why that margin is eroding, so that clearly I'm not getting the reporting of the granularity I need to understand where that cost of sale and where that cost of goods sold is going. All these being kind of events and indicators that some alignment needs to occur. Mike, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, I think this is just as you said, Chuck. I mean, I think a lot of times people put together a 3 to 5 year plan, and they put it on a shelf and they dust it off once a year or twice a year, or every periodically to just see how they're doing. And so I think a lot of times it's what are those drivers, what are those indicators, what are those measurements. So one of the questions that it was asked is, what are those metrics? And I think each of the items in your plan should have metrics to support why are you doing it, where you're at today, where do you think you're going to be, because not everybody's the same. There is no standard metric that says, one of the things I like is there's a called a data maturity curve that we use, and sometimes in our data analytics group, and it talks about where you're at in your use of data and analytics reporting within your business, and where do you want to be. And it's a whole kind of visual of how you can become really a data-centric organization. Not everybody can get there, or not everybody can get there in one step. So one of the things is to understand your business and really understand these events, these indicators, and really make sure that, again, the idea of this is for it to be tangible to the business. So and these events happen a lot, and a lot of times it happens without a lot of visibility into from the executive team down into the business until it's there. So yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, and I think we are up to another polling question, so I'll hand it over to Amy.
All right, thank you. So our second polling question is, have you recently experienced any of these events or indicators that have led to a change in strategy or planning for your company? And you can choose more than one answer here. And your options are changes in market or product focus, restructuring, M&A, cost increases that cause margin erosion, all of the above, or none of the above. And just a reminder, if you would like to receive CPE credit for today's webcast, you will need to respond to at least 3 of the 4 polling questions. All right, it looks like most are in. Make sure to hit submit. All right, here are the results.
Okay.
It's a pretty even distribution.
Yeah, a little surprised on somehow the restructuring and M&A being this high, but that's a good thing. It's, again, those are impactful events, so definitely something that makes you relook at your strategic technology plan. So great information. Yeah. So yeah, thank you everyone for sharing.
Definitely.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about something called the strategic planning value chain. So basically this is a way to have what lenses do I need to look at, and how do I need to look at my business as it is reflected in the strategic technology plan. And really, again, then how does that align back to, again, the greater business? But, as Chuck talked about, you always want to keep the people, process, technology, because it, again, to me, one of the aspects is if you're just looking at technology, you're going to be able to solve part of the problem. If you're not looking at how you're organized or how you're supporting, certain events or processes in your company, as well as what does that process look like? A lot of, people have antiquated processes or overly complex processes. Technology can help with that, can can automate a lot of things, but still a broken process is a broken process. So one of the things we really want to talk about is these 6 lenses that everybody, we feel everybody should keep in mind and really should look at as they build out their plan, and make sure that each of these are a focal point for each item in your plan, and that you're really being able to have what we feel is a fully comprehensive plan, as well as a process around the development, the execution, and the maintenance of that plan. So we'll go through each of these in detail. It starts with organizational alignment. We'll go through again each of these. Then it goes into organizational flexibility. A lot of people talked about, in the past survey, changing product or service, M&A thing. There's a lot going on in the business, and really need to make sure that you're building for that change. So the other piece is employee centric. I think this is one that a lot of times gets left off. And so we'll go into talking about what does that mean. Client centricity. You think about the internal view Chuck talked about. You also have the client or vendor or partner. He talked about 3PLs and things like that. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about each of those areas. Then we'll talk about the innovation. How do you, who's involved and how does this work, and really dig into some of that. And then last but definitely not least is the market alignment. You want to making sure that you are aligned with your company at the end of the day. I mean, how are you selling products or services? How are you delivering? How are you, all these pieces. So we're going to dig into each of these areas as we go forward. And I just wanted to kind of share the broader overview with everyone. So let's start with organizational alignment. So organizational alignment really kind of breaks down into 2 pieces here. So I think so many times I see people do one or the other, and they build a strategic plan that's, this 3 to 5 year roadmap, and really, again, tied to a lot of the business strategy or where they think the technology should go and evolve. And so really, I think some people are really good at this aspect. Some people are really good at the tactical. I think you have to have both in order to make sure that you've got a plan that you can work. So is the technology roadmap really driven by the business plan? And we talked about this a little bit. Is it do you have, for each item in your strategic plan, do you have why it's there and what it ties back to the business? Do you have decision points? Because again, as we talked about, changes in your business, the ability to be agile, all of these things, you need to have the ability to either pivot, as Chuck talked about, or just, move a little left or a little right. And really, how do you make sure that you're keeping your eyes up in the business and you're not just marching to a plan you developed today where the business may not look the same or be in the same place or the same direction 1 year, 2 years, 3 years down the road? And so how do you make sure that alignment stays connected to the business, and what does that mean? And then another question that came up is, do you have the KPIs? What do you measure? And everything should be measured. Everything should have why are we doing this? What improvements to the business? It could be very strategic in this area. It can be, again, better alignment with acquisitions, or able to pull an acquisition on in 30 days, or just making things up. But there's a lot of the more strategic directions. But in the strategic plan, a lot of times, I think we see people get really kind of little pie in the sky, and have the broader vision, if you will, but they don't really tie that back to tangible gains, actions, activities, measurements. And so we think even strategic, you've got to understand and know and measure why is it on the plan? What is it going to do for the business? And then the other side of that is the tactical. What are you going to gain? How urgent is it? What's the impact on the business? What's the limitation? What's your ability to deliver? I know a lot of clients that have they move at a very rapid pace. They're very, organized around change. They're very change friendly, if you will. And I have a lot that are not. And I think a lot of times it's really, again, the success of this plan is understanding your company and your business, and understanding how fast can that move, or what does it take to move that? Is that a cultural item? Is it a business item? Is it a people item? And really being able to make sure, again, you've got it aligned for success. And so then, you also, again, didn't need to drop down out of from your strategic down into a tactical of what are you doing to get there? I think another thing we see is a lot of times people build out this long-term plan, but it doesn't get worked because it is a 3 to 5 year plan. And people kind of get lost in how to chunk that down into manageable components that move the plan forward. So for each of your items, you may or may not be able to tackle them in a single project or phase or anything like that. So how do you break that down into components of work and components of deliverables and components of value realized back to the business that put you on that path and move you forward? But you may have, 3 or 4 or 5 of the stages within that to really get to what's on your strategic plan. But just because you can't get there in one doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to, again, chunk it down into manageable components so that you can, make sure you're on the path. And that's ultimately one of the things we see. Again, so many of our clients struggle with how to get from a strategic to an executable plan. And I think that's a huge component and huge item of it being successful is, what does that look like? And how do you break that down into real projects and real deliverables and real timelines that work for your business? Because again, I think everyone is different here. So the next is organizational flexibility. And I'm going to have Chuck talk about the organizational flexibility here.
Thanks, Mike. So when you're looking at organizational flexibility, I think there's 2 key components here. And the first one, I believe, is a little more difficult to get to, and that is you have to make sure you've got a functionally oriented organization. And what I mean by that is when you're looking at the flow of product and transactions, you have to be looking at the end-to-end process always. So when I am working with a lead and shaping up a deal, when I'm looking at that process, I need to be thinking all the way to the bank in terms of the way that process needs to flow, so that I'm facilitating the flow of data and I've got visibility into the flow of data. And this is one of the areas where you'll hear terms like horizontal and cross-functional. And really what that means at its core is that when you look at the process of doing business, there are going to be some threads that go end to end. As an example, I have down here lead to cash. On the procurement side, you could consider it source to settle. But essentially, when you are looking at your strategy and you're designing your systems, someone has to own lead to cash. And what that means is that when you're looking at your team and your responsibilities, there needs to be a process owner for that particular process. Who owns lead to cash? Who is making certain that process is designed with continuity so that when a deal is signed and becomes an order, it can very adeptly become an invoice or a number of invoices or one or more fulfillments, and then get to the point of having payment applied to an invoice that makes sense, and then I've got continuity through that process and a 360-degree view of the customer. And so when we're looking at functionally oriented organizations, that's the way that those organizations operate. Same thing on the procure to pay side, where I'm, talking to potential vendors, determining what my process is to make them a vendor, and then at that point looking at requisition to PO, to product delivered, to invoice received and paid. And so understanding that entire process, because we look at those transactions, they're really the same transaction throughout. They might be partially fulfilled, but the thread looks the same. And in situations where we see best of breed clients, this is a challenge because I'm taking my order in Salesforce, right? And I am potentially invoicing my order in a different system, an ERP system, an Infor, an NetSuite, an SAP. And I may have some kind of a disconnect between my catalog and the actual items that I'm using in my ERP system. And a functionally oriented organization is going to address this upfront in the design of the process, as well as in the design of how I'm taking care of data. And so that's an important aspect of that organizational flexibility, because you understand that thread and the impacts of that thread based on changes. The other key element is an extensible technical platform. And I find that depending on the vertical I'm working in, this can be more challenging than not, because typically I find that there's kind of a continuum. And the tighter a system is as far as solving your specific industry problem, tends to have a pretty weak technical stack and tends to be monolithic. I can't change it. And then on the other end of that thread, you've got very strong and flexible systems that might need some tailoring to get what you need done. But when I look at an extensible technical platform, some key things I'm looking for is what kind of friction is associated with adding a field or a table, so I can get some additional attributes to address the nuance of my business or data that I want to capture as I've got a transaction data stream running. An actionable and relevant user interface. When I've got somebody who was logging into the system to use it, a material handler perhaps, does that material handler see, all right, here's what I need to fulfill today. Here are the receipts I'm expecting today at the dock, the appointments that are scheduled, so that I've got an actionable day ahead of me, and the system is driving me to the relevant information I need to see it when. And then third, strong integration capabilities, both internal and external. Does my CRM talk to my ERP, right? Does my quality management system talk to my manufacturing execution system? Likewise, my product lifecycle management system. Do I have the ties I need between these systems to prevent heavy lifts and manual work? Beyond that, am I in a position to deal with third-party manufacturers, third-party logistics? Am I positioned to work with trading partners through EDI and do that seamlessly? Run into several cases where there's been business pivots with companies that maybe are dealing with beverages. I had an energy drink company. We're selling to on-premise restaurants and nightclubs. And all of a sudden our business grows. And now I've got to pivot into selling into grocery or larger distributors. And I've got EDI compliance requirements immediately. How hard is it to pivot into that type of a connection and that type of business? Again, that drives that organizational flexibility. Mike, anything to add there?
No, I think that's great. I think it does go into both things. I think this is, again, going back to our kind of theme is you've got a functionally focused area and you've got a technical architecture focused area that you need both. And you need to have them equal weighting as you look at your roadmap and your plan.
Good deal. Good deal.
So the next area we talk about is employee centricity. So Chuck talked about the the ability to adapt. And I think the other thing we don't always look at is, what is that impact on my employees? And whether that's, again, in accounting, or whether that's out in the warehouse, or that's, again, a consultant that's out in the field, or a field service person, or, salesperson, whatever the role is, understanding those personas and understanding where people, it's about giving them the right information at the right time in the right format, but also allowing them to interact in the process in as frictionless of a way as possible, from a process perspective. And then also from an adoption, if you read any article on why technology projects fail, always the number one reason is change management. People don't take into account the user experience, the user adoption, the communication of why are we doing this? What is the impact on me as a role as a user in a specific role? What does it mean? That alignment and starting that up front and really driving that all the way through your plan, not just, again, for a specific project, but really having that consistent change management component or work stream in your plan, as well as how does, again, that tie back to each of your tactical items that we just talked about earlier. But think about continual learning and development. One of the things we see is the reason people get off the rails is that new people come on, time passes, people get a little further away from the process, or they have different needs that aren't really addressed, and all of a sudden you're starting to get the shadow systems Chuck talked about. You're starting to get Excel or smart sheets on the side that are doing work. How do you, again, always bring that learning, development, alignment back to the employee? We talked about communication and involvement. How do you bring them into conversations? How do you bring them into decisions? The more you include people and the more you have them be part of it, the more successful you are and the more aligned you are with your different user bases and your different roles. Reporting information, right person's hands at the right time. Probably one of the number one things. If you can give people the information they need to do their job in a timely manner, in an easily consumable manner, your success rate goes up just infinitely. Again, purpose and role driven. Not everybody's the same. Not everybody sits behind a desk every day. Not everybody has information. If you think about how we consume information just daily, 5-10 years ago, you would have been happy sitting on a phone talking to a call center person. Now, I want information at my fingertips right now. Also, your support model. How are you supporting people as they have questions, as they have needs, and I think as we move from a lot of the old on-premise software to the cloud software, that support model changes. A lot more is shifted to the functional side of the house than used to be. And you need the right support model. What is my support model? Chuck talked about process support, technology support, whether that's, again, vendors or integrations or reporting. How does that work in your business, and what does that look like in order to effectively support not just the technology, again, the associated processes and information that needs to go into that the technology just supports and houses. Again, we talked about change management, and this is another one that's very culturally driven. What is your company, or what's your business? How do people absorb information? How change ready are people? I've got clients, again, they don't think about pivoting. They're very fast moving. Their business moves at that pace. I've got some that need to be very methodical about this. And so, again, adapting to what's going to be successful is massively important in this area. So I think, excuse me, Chuck, if you want to go, let's talk about the client centricity.
Sounds great. Sounds great. So essentially, when we're talking about client centricity, I know Mike just covered the employee centricity. The difference here is you still have a feedback loop, but the value is different and the engagement's different. And so when we're looking at client centricity, we're considering adoption. How do customers and vendors or partners in general want and need to interact with our company? So I often hear, are you meeting the customer where the customer wants you to be? And so, what channels do I have to be addressing there? How do I need to be interacting with a client? And does my technology support that interaction? And more importantly, does it support the continuity within those interactions? So in other words, when I say I'm going to do something, does my process dictate that it gets done, right? And so essentially, the customer's got a consistent experience and a positive experience, because we all know what goes on when they don't, particularly with the consumers. There's going to be negative noise out there that you'd rather not hear. And so the adoption piece is important. The experience piece is important. And again, I think the key to the experience is consistency, expectation setting, and more importantly, not letting things go into a black hole. One of the biggest black holes that exist in society today is email. It'll go there, it'll die, and you're going to have a bad customer experience. Do you have a system that knows you have a customer issue open, you have tasks to do, and that they're going to get done? So closing up that loop. And then again, change management. How do you talk to your customers about how they interact with your company or how that's going to change? Over and above new product, hey, I've got a new customer portal, or I've got a new way to help you, or a new way to get feedback from you. What does that communication loop look like? And more importantly, as you engage with the customers, are you collecting data from those engagements? So looking at, satisfaction surveys, social polls. And the most important thing I look at here is that as I'm pulling that data about the interactions with a customer together, can I pull that together with the transactional data associated with a customer? How are my profitable customers behaving in terms of their interaction with the company? And does my system give me that visibility? So anything to add there, Mike?
I think you're hitting it on the head. I think really it is. It's just like you're aligning with your employees. You got to align with your clients and your vendors, and it makes a big difference. And again, this is a big one in tying back to the business plan for the company. What is your growth? What products or service are you trying to sell? Who are you trying to sell that to? What markets are you in? Are there different cultural pieces if you're a global company? A lot of factors there, but really having that external lens is ultimately what this is about. All right.
Good deal.
So let's shift gears into innovation. And this was a question that was entered in on the QA. So hopefully this will answer this, but we can talk more about it later if we need to. But the innovation and how that evolves, and innovation sometimes is a theoretical word, and I don't believe that. I think it's how do you apply change to your business? And that can be, sometimes it can be very, very tactical. It sometimes can be very strategic long-term. But I think there's kind of two facets here. One is understanding where you need to go and having those. We talked about employee, we talked about clients, we talked about change triggers in the business. We talked about, compliance. We really talked about compliance today, but a lot of organizations have compliance that they have to live with. I mean, there's some very specific industries that have very large compliance needs. Understanding that and not having it be a one-way street, having it really being able to regularly get and solicit that feedback and how do you apply it? And I think that's the other thing is, what does it mean to your plan, to your roadmap? The other piece is, your functional and technical collaboration. So who should be on your team? It should be IT, it should be executives, it should be stakeholders in the business, whether that's by line of business, by process area that Chuck talked about, but it really should be. So as of structure, again, kind of depends on your size and the complexity of your business, but a lot of times people will have an executive team that kind of sets that more strategic plan, but then they'll have an operational steering committee that pulls that down into really how do I apply that? How do I make that into, again, we talked about chunking it down into manageable components. Some of that's all in one. Some of that, is the executives a little less formal, and it may be just reach outs and specific meetings. But, I believe you should revisit your plan no less than twice a year, a lot of times quarterly, again, depending on how much you change as a business. And you should have executives, you should have stakeholders or process owners. You should have, obviously, IT. And you should have those feedback mechanisms that we talked about that just flow data into it of how is the business doing and how is technology supporting the business. So you have operational people, you have finance people, you have sales, you have product people, and making sure that, again, all of that stays connected. If you have an online presence, cybersecurity. I mean, if you're selling things, be an e-commerce engine, or you have an online presence, again, just, locking in compliance we talked about, is it, SOX compliance or SOC compliance or a specific industry compliant need or requirement. But the idea here is to have the holistic team. Don't make it about IT. It's got to include the business, and the business has to have a leading voice in this, because otherwise I think this is where we see the divestiture between the how the technology actually supports the business.
And Mike, I think one of the triggers here on who your stakeholders are is watching for those shadow systems we keep talking about.
Yep.
Because if you see something like that spring up, you've got a very effective individual trying to solve a problem. Bring them in to the room and find out what problem they're solving.
Yep.
And I think that's true of smart sheets. I think and again, when we look at the feedback loop, procure to pay is a great feedback loop. If you see cloud spend, find out why. Obviously you've got controls on your spend limits, but any IT initiative that springs up, be it formal or informal, I think it's good to dialogue about that. You're not necessarily saying no, but you're asking the question why, and making certain that the problem is being solved holistically and not just in a silo.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Completely agree with that. All right.
Good deal. Let me see here. And so market alignment. So essentially what we're looking at here in market alignment kind of ties back to the agility and also the customer centricity. But essentially, are you getting the voice of the customer as you're looking at your data, as you're looking at the interactions with your customer? Do you have the ability to adapt to market conditions and needs quickly and effectively? Again, I'll bring up the fact that, disruption is just the norm anymore. And obviously, you can have changes in economy, changes in financial markets. But when you look at what goes on within your market, I spent years working in the cooler business. And to say that what Yeti did was seismic is an understatement. All of a sudden, we went from a cooler, being judged by how long it kept ice to, it's got to keep ice, but it's also going to survive a bear attack. And so you had a complete disruption in the cooler industry, and the bar is now a bear attack. And so looking at those types of events and looking at your organization's capacity to react to that event, or fortunately for you, cause said event. And so that's what we're looking at in terms of market alignment and allowing your technology to give you the decision support to make the decisions and to make the pivots. Again, the last bullet here, how does technology help us understand our business? And so are you mining that data and getting the decision support that you need in terms of where you're going? Because the business is evergreen, it's constantly going to be changing, and you want to leverage that data to make those changes and make those changes effectively. Anything to add there, Mike?
Yeah, and I think a lot of times this is one where people get really, pie in the sky and really look at, some of these things, and it should. But also there's some very tactical pieces here, like COGS. If I make something and I sell something, I may sell a lot of it, but if I don't make any money at it, why do I do that? And understanding, understanding my cost of goods sold, understanding, my margin on services, understanding, where I sell things. Am I selling it through my distributor? Am I selling it, direct to consumer? Am I selling it? So all of that, it helps. The technology can help make decisions in the business that drive where investments are made, where, the focus is, pivots, as Chuck talked about. I mean, again, I had a client, in COVID, they were a brick and mortar retailer and had an e-commerce strategy that was going to take 2 to 3 years. Well, obviously with COVID, that got enabled in about 3 months. So a lot of things like that technology can really drive the business and drive effective decision-making. That's one of the really beauties of technology in my mind is if you do it right, if you have the right processes, if you have the right data, if you have the right information to the right people, it enables good decision-making within your business, which in effect helps you run your business better. And that's one of the biggest items and value statements for what technology provides to the business. So with that, we're going to go to our third polling question. Sorry. And Amy?
All right, thank you. So our third polling question is, does your current technology plan take into account both internal and external factors? And your options are yes, no, or not sure. And for those of you that would like a copy of today's slides, you can download them from the folder that says slide deck and handouts. And then we're also sending them out via email tomorrow, along with a recording of this webcast. All right. Looks like most have submitted, and we do have one more polling question coming up here shortly. Here are the results.
That's good to see.
Yeah, that's good. That's a little higher number than I would have expected. I think a lot of the ones we see really look internally, but don't look externally. So great to hear. That's wonderful news. All right. So real quickly, we'll go just talk about how we help clients through this. I won't spend a lot of time here. We can give your slide. And if you guys, you always feel free to reach out to either Chuck or I. We're glad to have a call with anyone. But really, at the end of the day, a lot of times we hear from clients, we don't know how to get started, or we don't know how to build a structure and a process that is sustainable. And that really is a lot of what we try to help our clients do in their particular situation. Because I think in everybody's different. Again, you have different sizes, you have different industries, you have different cultures, you have different technology platforms and where you're at, your status of them. And I've got clients that haven't implemented a new major system in 10 years. I've got some that are very cutting edge and very leading edge as to how they do it. So the idea here is to be able to meet you where you're at and help you move forward. And again, some of that may be very, very high performing. Some of that may be, I need to get 3 steps further up than I am. But the idea really is to help, inform what should be in the plan. What are those business needs? How do you drive that? How do you support that? How do you reinforce? And how do you, again, think back to 2 areas. How do you build a strategic plan that defines where you're going, and a tactical plan that defines the steps and activities and actions of how you are going to get there? And so really that's what we try to help our clients do, is align that, organize that, and create a structure and a process, not just, Excel or PowerPoint or whatever, format you want your plan on. And how do you also put a process in to manage that? Because that was, again, a question, is how often do you visit it? I say that depends on you. I would say no less than every 6 months. But I've got clients that meet once a month. I've got client meets once a quarter. And what is that pace of change that you're trying to achieve? And what does that do? Or you may meet very frequently out of the gate, and then you kind of back it down to every quarter or 6 months as you kind of get further into the plan. But the idea is you want to be able to have the right people on the team. You want to have the right process that the team follows. And most of all, again, that continual connection to your employees, to your clients, and most of all to your strategic plan as a business. And that's what we really try to help our clients do. So Amy, we'll do the 4th polling question, and then we'll look at some questions.
All right. So the last polling question is, if you don't have a technology roadmap and plan, are you currently building one or expecting to start in the next 6 months? And then your options are yes, no, or not sure. And then once you've completed all CPE requirements, you will be able to download a PDF of your certificate from the CPE progress window in your console. We'll give it a few more seconds. All right, here are the results.
Okay. Good. Nice.
A lot of activity.
Yeah. As Chuck said, there's a lot going on in the world and a lot of changes going on. So definitely leads to a lot of the, a more and more impactful need for this type of plan within your company. So I know we only have a couple minutes. There are a couple questions we didn't get to that I'll try to for the next couple of minutes. But one is, how do we get started? And I think that goes into, defining this group and the process you're going to follow and how that's going to work. And what works for you. Again, I think some companies are more sophisticated, they're larger, more complex. So you may have an executive committee, you may have an operating committee, and the other question was who owns it. I think that operating committee is the owner, whether that is chaired by IT or the business, or you have a kind of a separate group, kind of TBD based on, again, your business. But I do think that operating committee is the owner. But I think it is highly dependent on that communication and that alignment with the executive committee is to make sure that stays in sync. I think, again, what we see a lot of times is there's an initial, we create it, and then you look 1 year, 2 years down the path and where the business is heading and where the strategic plan tells you should be going aren't aligned anymore. So I think it's the job of that operating committee to to define it, to revisit it, to make sure the alignment's there, and to really drive the process in your business. And I think that whether that's, again, owned by the business or owned by IT, completely dependent on your company and how your company functions. So with that, I think we're at time. Again, thank you for your time today. We truly appreciate you spending an hour with us, and hopefully it was a good use of that hour. And I know Amy said that we're going to send all this out, but also you have mine and Chuck's email address. Please don't hesitate to reach out. Glad to answer any questions, jump on a call, do whatever is helpful to you. And I really do appreciate your time and energy today.
All right. Well, thank you, Chuck and Mike, for a really great presentation today. And then if you did meet your CPE requirements, your certificate is available to download now. A copy will be emailed within 2 weeks if you have difficulties. And then finally, here's a link to a survey for today's presentation. Your feedback is appreciated, and thank you for joining us. Take care, everyone.